All right, welcome everybody. We're really excited to have as part of our series tonight people who have started the Trail Fixing Collective. We have Colin Pogue, who's up in Bartlett, Finn Mahoney, who's down in Kentucky right now, Sam Norton, who's over in Pittsfield, though actually not right in Pittsfield, I think this very second, and Hunter Scott, who's up in Skowhegan, Maine area. And they all have spent time in Tamworth. In the winter, they spread themselves out and do other things. But we're here tonight to hear about some of the cool ways they found to be part of making it work in Tamworth and starting this neat trail fixing collective. So welcome everyone tonight, and thank you all for showing up tonight from all your various places.
Cool. All right. Is that live? Can you see that?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, it's great.
Great. All right. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name's Colin. I'm part of the Trail Fixing Collective here. We're just going to run through our individual introductions, start you off, let you know who we all are, and then we'll go forward into the who, what, why, where, when, all that good stuff. So I'm Colin Pogue. I'm from Hanover, New Hampshire originally, over on the Connecticut River. I grew up there running, swimming, Nordic skiing with my family. And our neighborhood always bordered on the Appalachian Trail corridor when I was growing up, which was a pretty unique way that I was exposed to sort of the quiet curiosity of a trail winding off into the woods. So after going to school up in Ontario for geography, I came back down to New Hampshire and moved into a little place here in Bartlett, New Hampshire. And I've been doing trail work full time around the Northeast and here in New Hampshire ever since then. And in the wintertime, my second job is I'm the youth programs coordinator up here at Jackson Cross Country.
Hi, my name is Hunter Scott, as mentioned before. I live up here in Athens, Maine, which is 20 minutes north of Skowhegan, if you know where that is. And this is kind of where I got indoctrinated into the outdoors, with, being so close to Baxter State Park in the Allagash. Did lots of camping as a kid. I did try the college scene for a little bit at Unity, and then after an intense GIS course, decided to leave, and I eventually wound up meeting these folks doing trail work, and I've been with them through a lot of stuff, staying in pretty good communications with them and whatnot, and during the off season, just getting ready for maple syrup season. That's about it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam. That's just a picture of me with a cat friend of mine. I grew up in the Connecticut River Valley in Massachusetts, and I've pretty much lived in that valley ever since. I went to college down in Middletown, Connecticut, and then in the summer times, I worked up north in New Hampshire doing trail work, where I got my experience. Right after college, I did one season of trail work in the Adirondacks of New York, and right after that, I started this crew with these other folks you see here and a couple other people as well. And in the wintertime, I've been living in Pittsfield, Mass, as was mentioned earlier, and I do media type work in the wintertime and do a lot of planning for our summers, which are coming up.
Hey folks, a lot of you know me. My name is Finn Mahoney. Those are my parents, Polly and Kevin. You might know Polly from the library. I've been living all over for a number of years. Right now I'm down to Kentucky, but I've called Tamworth home for a long time. This spring I'll graduate from Berea College down here, where I study biomedical stuff and work with horse loggers. I love to cook for the crew, and I get to minister to their various blisters and gastrointestinal ailments. I worked for the AMC for many years, but working in TFC LLC is, as we say, as good as trail work gets, and it's really meaningful to be a part of this beautiful little business and collective we have in the place that I call home, and to be so close to my friends and neighbors as well as the people I love in this crew.
Yeah, right on. All right, so I'll take us from there with our introduction. So the Trail Fixing Collective, LLC, TFC, as we know ourselves, was born out of very much a shared love of the White Mountains, of this place that we call home. In one way or another, the forests and peaks of this region have sort of bared witness to a lot of thresholds of personal learning and growth that each of our members have gone through during our time here. I think it goes without saying that we've all had incredibly meaningful experiences building trails here in the Whites around the Northeast that have given us a sense of wanting to devote our time and our life to working here and contributing to this area. So while working in the woods, trail builders naturally learn to see the varied land use history of the White Mountains. And this photo you can see here is the path leading up Mount Willard, an old carriage road. It's certainly no secret that many of our trails did not begin as trails, but rather as tote roads, carriage paths, bridle paths, even, thundering mountain railroads that brought logs out of the hills of these places. And so there really is an incredible amount to discover in the landscapes that's really just hiding below the surface and that you begin to pick up on as you spend time in the woods. It's a very magical thing to read the landscape in the way we get to. So for many of us, there's a real magic in being able to take what we learn as we walk through the woods and incorporate it into our work. Here you can see a pretty intensive staircase that was put in on the Mount Willard Trail. This is sort of building off of the old history of the area and the rocks that were exposed by the horses as they made their way up the mountain to Willard. And there's a real connection in being able to repurpose the materials that have come out of past structures, past land use, and finding a continuity in the forests and the trails that we're working with. It's sort of this excavation of a storied past that we all feel is very much worth rediscovering and retelling as a crew. So for many of us, our introduction here in the White Mountains to trail work specifically was through local clubs like the Appalachian Mountain Club. Everybody here, myself, Sam, Finn, Hunter, all got our start there. There's also other clubs like the Randolph Mountain Club and smaller organizations, not to mention the several regional conservation corps that we have here in the region who do a really good job of creating entry-level opportunities for young people who are interested or curious about what trail work is. For those first few seasons of trail building, here's Finn and Sam learning the ropes of setting up rigging gear in the woods. We are provided a very learner-friendly environment in clubs and core crews. They take on people who have no experience and create a space where there's time and space to learn all of these skills on the job, in the woods, on the clock. And that's a very valuable thing, can't be discounted. So as we all progressed through this, there did come a time, however, where we each became knowledgeable enough and capable enough that we ran into the question of what the next step might be going beyond club and core programs here in the White Mountains. And so we had to start asking ourselves, what are the options for young people hoping to continue to live and work in the White Mountains while maintaining our trail networks in a professional sense? As we looked around, we found that the choices were actually pretty few, especially for the types of egalitarian, cooperative, full-time crew structures that we felt would really work well in both empowering young trail builders to find a sense of a career here while providing just a very livable income and really dedicating our work to our communities here in the region. So needless to say, after a lot of research and many meetings and plenty of great supportive discussions with other folks from organizations who were interested in our work, it became clear that we wanted to set out on a path to build our own professional trail work opportunity.
Thank you, Colin. So why exactly did we settle for like a collective or like an LLC structure? And a lot of that has to do with, you know, as I just mentioned, structure being a key point in our identity and how we operate, and like the positive progression that we make in this LLC. You know, we oh boy. You know, at first we really did want, you know, to start this off as like a normal nonprofit, but having been through, you know, the hierarchy of those past organizations, we just it didn't work out for us that way. And you know, for the most part, that works for this area. You got the AMC, the Nature Conservancy, you got RMC, all great places. And you know, they all have board of directors, administrative staff, and ground crew, where we're the ground crew and we don't have a whole lot of decision-making power or a whole lot of say in what we do. But again, that it works great for them. You know, they provide great opportunities for summer jobs. They provide education for the public, because that just helps reduce mountain rescues and whatnot and other hazards. And they also provide really good recreational opportunities as well. And we're not selling that. We're selling ourselves, our profession, which is why TFC LLC is a limited liability company, which brings seasoned trail workers together, and to heighten their profession, and so that they can improve their skill set in a more professional manner, and so that they have a lot more representation. So when joining, first off, they have more decision-making power in like general trail projects and just like day-to-day problems, so to speak. Anything within the company, anything that has to do with groundwork, they're allowed to have an opinion and say in that, and we strive for that too. Yeah. So, and that's one thing that we hope for, is just consistent striving in making sure they're able to voice their opinions comfortably at all times. And a lot of that is, you know, as I mentioned, or Colin mentioned during those meetings, often not, there's no hard yes or no, do it this way or do it that way. It's a lot of us sitting down and talking for sometimes very long periods of time, and just continuing talking until we figure out how we want to do something. And it's great that way. It's how we grow closer together, you know. You can see on through this photo here, when we're on top of Rumford Whitecap over in the Rumford, Maine area. We're all happy-go-lucky family on top of that mountain. It's pretty nice.
Cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty. So Yeah, and I just to follow up on that, I mean, we're often inspired by other, labor organizations that exist in the US, and in particular, there's in the conservation world, there's a lot of ski patrollers out west, for instance, that are unionizing, and so we're inspired by those types of things. And while we're not a union, we sort of, through our organization, hope to emulate the goals of organized labor through our crew in a small way. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the work we do and the kinds of work we do and where the money comes to allow us to do that work, basically. So we work, TFC works on public land almost exclusively, and that's by design because we sort of feel that our heart lies in public lands, public trails, and in access to those natural settings, basically. So we've sort of found ways to do work in those areas through different funding sources that we have, and we of course work with private entities as well. But that is our mission, to be a crew that's public in terms of who can join us and do our work, and also we want to have an impact that affects ordinary people and not just an exclusive few people who might be a part of a club in upstate New York or something like that. So that's kind of what we strive for. And the motivation for the work we do comes not just from being an organization that's egalitarian, but also from just the physical need for more trail workers, more trail crews, basically because the trails in the White Mountains are falling apart right now. There's a huge uptick in the use of trails since the COVID-19 pandemic. There have been a lot of just much more people coming up from more southern states and from this area as well. People just want to get out of the house and experience something that people have loved in the White Mountains for generations. So there's no real blame to be cast there. It's just sort of the reality that with more use and more people coming, there's more wear and tear on the tread surface, and there's more erosion, and there's just simply more work that needs to be done to keep the trails in working order and keep them visible and basically healthy in a way that allows people to enjoy the woods but not impact the natural surroundings any more than it already is. And the other side of that is climate change, of course. We're having more unpredictable weather. We're having wetter summers. We had an unbelievable amount of rain last summer, I'm sure you were all aware of. So, with more water also comes more erosion, and sort of those combining factors just make more of a demand for urgent work to get done in the trails of the White Mountains. So we're very excited to be a part of that and to work with all kinds of other crews that are working to just band-aid the situation, and then hopefully create a structure of trail work and trail design that will make our trails more sustainable in the long term. Because basically a lot of our trails have been designed, were designed 100 years ago, 200 years ago in a way that was not really well thought out. They were designed to just be a rip start up the mountain, and they were not particularly fun trails. And we're sort of in the school of thought that kind of believes that a trail should be either built in a place that will not experience too much erosion, or be rebuilt in the present day in a way that will allow the grade to be sustainable enough that water can run off and keep the treadway healthy. So yeah, so we do our work on public land, but we often get funding through other organizations, and we have a lot of networks of private funders and other smaller clubs and different groups that allow us to just get hired and to do the work that we do, because we're a pretty young crew. We don't have like Hunter said, an administration that acquires funding. So we rely on other groups. So for instance, in Franconia Notch, we're doing a project. We're a part of a project called the Franconia Ridge Restoration Project, and money for that project comes from all kinds of sources. It comes from the federal government, from the state government, and we're working on the state portion of that land. And the money that we're receiving to do that work comes through our sort of our partner, Peter S. Jensen and Associates LLC, and the money that he receives to do that work comes from the World Trails Network, which is a great organization in the area that can take private funding and as a nonprofit, and then deploy that money to crews like us, so that we are able to do our work without having a huge administration sort of above us. And it just allows us to have a way of operating as a collective, as we are, but with a strong support network. So that's kind of how we get the work that we do, and we're very thankful for all the different partners that have come together to make our crew viable.
So as other folks have said, you know, the way we're structured is that there is no hierarchy within our business. And so the only people who are allowed to own the business are the people who are actually building the trail with their own two hands. And the only people who are allowed to make decisions in the business are those who are building the trail. And everyone who works for the business also gets an ownership share. And so when we choose where to work and what projects to work on, that's a choice that we make collectively. As Hunter said, we talk a lot. It takes a lot of talking to reach, because most of our decisions we make by consensus. We vote on them, but generally we talk until we all agree that we want to take on a specific project or do something a particular way. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk us through a couple of recent projects that we were working on in the last couple of years, just so you guys can kind of get a feel. So like many of us on this Zoom call, our life has some pretty seasonal rhythms to it. We work outside in the mountains, and so that really precludes working in the winter. So in the spring, for the last few years, we have traveled to Pennsylvania while there's too much snow on the ground to work in New Hampshire. And so we've been working on a 10-mile section of the Appalachian Trail down there. It's not in a particularly nice part of Pennsylvania. It's a super fun site, actually, but as Sam was saying, the money has to come from somewhere. And so in Pennsylvania, the money for that project comes from the Superfund site and from the remediation efforts there. And so it allows us to build miles and miles of brand new trail, which you can see Hunter working on there. And as others have said, our goal is not to replicate the trail that was there. Our goal is to build a trail that's much more sustainable and that's much more usable, which is, you know, super important on the AT. As others have said, the numbers of people using that trail just keep going up every year, as does the rainfall and the extreme weather it's experiencing. And so sections up and down the East Coast need help. But this is how we begin. This is where we'll be in April of this year, is down in Pennsylvania, where it's a bit warmer and where there's no snow on the ground, building trail down there. So the next project we're going to talk about is this project that others have referenced. It's a big part of our summer, and this is on Old Bridle Path in Franconia Notch. So this is the trail that starts on the interstate and then goes all the way up to Greenleaf Hut and then up to Mount Lafayette beyond that. And in the last few years, that trail, the usage of that trail has increased exponentially. And it's hard to picture that, but here's an image. During COVID, there were lines going up and down that trail, hundreds of people long. That is how many people were on that trail at one time. So it's become much, much more heavily used. And as such, it needs a really serious rethinking, not just rebuilding. And so that's what we're doing there. As you could see in that first shot, one of our crew members working on the staircase, this does not look like any of the trails in the Sandwich Range. You know, this doesn't look like any trails in Tamworth or in Sandwich. or really in the rest of the White Mountains. The goal is to rebuild over a series of many years that entire trail all the way. Well, really the goal is to rebuild the entire loop, but beginning with this trail to rebuild from the interstate all the way up to the top of Mount Lafayette at no greater than a 10% slope and 5 feet wide the entire way. Every step is not a rock we found in the woods. It's a rock we cut and split and shaped so that we can build exactly 8-inch by 16-inch by 5-foot steps. Every step the whole way up will be like that. And you know, the reason to do that is really twofold. On the one side, this is the kind of trail that can actually support that number of people. The trail that is there now cannot sustain that number of people. It's eroding really fast and it's becoming less and less stable. And part of that is that it becomes less and less user-friendly. The steps get taller, they get harder to use, the rocks get looser and more dangerous. And so the trail, as the usage goes up, the accessibility of it goes down. And that's what we are really seeking to do on this project. And this is another one, as others mentioned, with Peter Jensen, who's a longtime local trail builder. He followed a similar path to us. He started building trails for the AMC back in the 70s, and then broke off and formed his own private trail building company. And we work a lot with him. He's a really great mentor to our crew. But as you can see in this picture, to build a trail like that, every stone has to be split and cut and shaped. None of those stones we brought up from the interstate. It's much too far and much too hard. And so it's a labor-intensive way of building a trail, but it allows us to build something that is really permanent and really sustainable. So as you can see in that image, the grade is really specific, and every step is really crafted to be as easy to use and as long-lasting as possible. If any of you want to see us at work, you're welcome to come visit us up there. We'll be up there all summer long, and we're working down near the bottom, so you don't even have to hike all the way up the mountain to come see us. But these are some examples of those stairs going up and the grading of the trail. You'll see there's a lot of things missing that might be on a traditional trail, not just steep staircases, but deep water bars or features like that. Really part of the design of this trail is to make it so that it doesn't need a lot of maintenance either. You don't have to come up there and work on it every year. You build it in such a way that it will stay the same, sort of in perpetuity. It's like it's a bit like we're paving this dirt road that washes out every year. And so this is a much more permanent solution that's still grounded, you know, in the tradition of trail building that exists here, but is actually able to meet the needs of that trail. The last project we'll look at is a little bit closer to home. Probably some or all of you at some point have hiked up to the top of Rattlesnake over in Holderness, that beautiful viewpoint that looks out over Squam Lake, over Rocky Wold and Deep Haven. And this is the bottom of that trail. Squam Lake Association hired us to work on this trail this past summer. And unlike those other two projects where we were basically constructing a new trail or obliterating what's there and building something completely new, here, this is a situation where we were really trail fixing. You can see us there. This trail is another one where usage had increased a lot in the last few years, and so it become less and less accessible. And it's a beautiful little trail. It's not very long, it's not very steep, and it should be accessible to most anyone with a basic hiking ability. But because of this usage, it had become less and less accessible. The steps get steeper and steeper and less stable. And so that's really what we're doing here. You can see this is sort of our finished product going up there. It's the same trail bed as used to be there. The steps are in some of the same places, but it's been redesigned in such a way that All the steps themselves are pretty low. They're low enough that you can really walk to the top of Rattlesnake now without bending your knees very much, which is pretty important to a lot of folks in our area. And something that brings us a lot of joy to be able to make a trail that our community can now use, or a greater fraction of our community can use. And so that's sort of the skinny on our work on Squam Lake. This coming summer, we will probably be back in the Squam area. We'll be back in Pennsylvania. We'll be back up in Franconia Notch. We may do a bit of work in Vermont and perhaps in other areas across the state as well. And with that, I think we can open up for some questions.
Is that the end of your presentation, you guys?
Yeah.
You can pop your faces all up there, Sam, Colin.
Oh, should I stop sharing my screen now, you think?
Yeah, and then we can see
Okay.
everybody and you can see people's hands up.
Nice bunch of lemurs.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. The only boot for us.
Everyone feel free to jump on in and ask any questions or have any comments.
I'm curious, did you work on the Rumpet Whitecap Trail too? I saw you
Yes.
up there a few times. In your slides, in your pictures.
Yes, yeah, good eye. We were up there for a week this summer, fixing some older side hilling work that a crew had done, trying to bench out the trail that had begun to wash away, and there were a lot of problematic sections with too many roots. And so we went back and reestablished a better grade into the trail, down in the forest, not up towards the summit as much.
Yeah. Great,
That's a-
great hike, great mountain.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, we loved it there.
Yeah.
too. We were working with the Mahoosic Land Trust, who's just a small group of folks in Bethel who are committed to protecting those mountains, and that's who we love to work for. We like to work for smaller local clubs so that we can build trails that are really for the communities where we build them. And so we were really happy to come out there and help improve that trail, which is another one that has really gotten knocked out by a lot more people using it in the last couple of years than before.
Go ahead, Peggy.
Oh, should I do the e-hand? Anyway, I have so many questions about like the sleeping, the eating, the traveling every day, gloves. Do you guys wear gloves? How far do you, some of those stones looked big and heavy. Do you tripods change? What, technical stuff. And also for us home step builders, do you start at the bottom? How do you do it? Let's hear everything. I mean, I really loved hearing the formation of turning into a business because hallelujah. But how about the doing? Let's hear about that.
Sure.
I like the boots. That's a good clue.
Okay.
And what are the best pants that last in the legs?
Yeah, well, if you you've stumbled into our crew generally because you'll see a mess of limbers. Everyone's generally wearing Dickies work pants because they're cheap and they seem to last forever. Just a filthy t-shirt and a pair of suspenders is often what we wear. You wear suspenders because they sort of they float around your waist a little more, and they're far more comfortable for when you're bending over all day long, moving rocks, lifting things up, putting things down. And when it's really, really bad, sometimes you might see a bug net on one of us, but not often. And our crew everyone has their own style, but I would say gloves are there. We make sure that the business pays for gloves. All, personal protective equipment is encouraged, and we try to subsidize that for everybody if we can to make sure that everyone feels they can be safe easily if they want to. But yeah, we lay that out pretty directly from the beginning. We're a professional crew, so we want to be professional in every way that we can.
So
as far as, oh yeah.
you weren't finished. You go ahead and finish.
Well, your question was pretty much, that's so big. I don't even know how to start. Sam, do you want to describe how we move the big rocks, you know? There's
Sure.
certainly a lot there to dig into.
Yeah, I mean, moving rocks is all very situational. You know, you have different kinds of projects you might be doing. You might be building a rock water bar or a staircase, or like a turnpike where you sort of raise the trail up to one side and create sort of a gully on one side of the trail. So it depends on what you're building and where you're building it and where the materials are that you're trying to use to build that structure. So generally, if the stones you're building with are very near to the trail, and they're in a good shape, we'll just move them by hand. We'll use either just our body and our muscles to move the rock to the location that we're building, or we'll use hand tools like a rock bar or a pickmatic, which is sort of like a pickaxe, that we use to sort of maneuver the stones into place. And that works great in somewhere like a talus slope in Pennsylvania, where we were working this spring, where we were building up this sort of steep mountainside, and there was just it was a land of plenty. There was so many rocks there, and they were shaped in a really great way. So it was just a matter of moving them with our bodies and sort of arranging them in the way that we wanted to. But in the White Mountains, we often have a more challenging situation where the stones are less accessible, less less plentiful. They're not as close to our project either, and so that requires some more planning and more kind of technical manipulation to get them to the project site. So, for instance, in our work in Franconia Notch, we're building a lot of very technical stone staircases, like Finn mentioned and showed pictures of. So we basically, the process there is we go into the woods, we maybe 100 feet away from our project site, and we just dig in the ground. We sort of see what we can see, kind of poking up from the moss, and then we pull stones out of the earth, often very big stones, and then we then go and we split them into different pieces. We use feathers and wedges and stone rock drills, and we break them apart, kind of like cracking an egg, and then we basically create a flat surface, a flat edge on that stone, and then we might break it into, say, 2 or 3 more chunks until we have maybe out of one original rock, we have 4 different stones that we can use as sort of building blocks for a staircase. And then from there, we usually move the stones to a staging site, sort of somewhere in the woods off the trail that's accessible to a number of different projects we might be working on in the same area. And then from there, we use rigging equipment to literally fly the rocks from the woods onto the trail site where we're actually building those structures. So we use basically a series of pulleys and winches to raise the rocks in the air with a harness, and then sort of zip line them through the woods to a drop site. And then from there, we just build the staircase, and that's kind of the short
I
of the
like
project.
the flying rocks.
Yeah.
And the last question was about your living situation. So when you're in Pennsylvania, for example, do you tent? Do you B&B? What do you do? Do you live in your cat van?
Finn, do you want to answer
Friends?
Yeah, we in Pennsylvania, we all live in a big Airbnb together. It's usually like a training center for missionaries during the rest of the year, but we use it for our own religious indoctrination for a month and a half while we're down there. And
With the rocks.
but during the rest of the year, like our dream, I think this year it looks like we'll all live together in a house in Tamworth, which is kind of our dream. That's really the way it works best, is when we're able to all share a space on the weekends as well. But it's sort of to each their own. Some folks will live in that house with us. Other folks will have or find other living arrangements. But that's a big part of what we've been working on this winter is where our housing is going to be for the summer. And that's a big part of what sort of brings us together is sharing more than just being together in the woods. But most of the summer we live out in the woods at the project. We're there all week long. Depends on how far we are. Like in Franconia Notch, we live in the campground, Lafayette Place that's down in the Notch, and then we just walk across the highway to work each morning. But when we're working in the Mahoosics or at Squam, we're living out in the woods near the project site.
So great. Well, I hope you're keeping notes and not just stupid texts and, so books are really important.
We love to.
Poetry, the whole thing.
Go ahead,
Memoir.
Kevin.
I have a question. It connects to the last thing. So if you're out in the woods, spending weeks in the woods, near the trail or off the trail, tell us a story or two about either human or animal encounters. You must have so many stories. Just give us one or two about human or animal encounters in your work.
Yeah. Hunter, you must have something.
Well, specifically on Franconia, yeah, quite a few. So Frank, out on the old bridle path, that's, as we mentioned before, that's a pretty heavily used trail. And my word, there are so many darn school groups and hikers going up that trail. I really just want to hide somewhere in the woods. But and we usually do for lunch, stay out of the sight of the public, and they for the most part do not realize that we're there eating or doing whatever, thankfully. And in some cases I wish they could see us. Like, for example, this one time we were eating lunch and a school group just happened to be passing by. A lot of them look at our tools like it's out of a fan fiction or like a sci-fi novel because they haven't seen hand tools in ages. And one of those little kids, I don't know the age group, one of them had a hammer and decided it would be a good idea, a hammer that he picked up from one of our tool caches without permission. And he thought it would be a good idea to toss it at someone in front of him. Thankfully, the hammer missed. But as it turns out, I believe it was either Colin's or Sam's banana, and Colin stood up and was just like, "Is that your hammer?" And that poor little kid turned around, frightened and bug-eyed. "No," and put it back down, Colin remarked, and the rest of them scurried on. That's one of the better ones.
Yeah.
I would
There's
say
certainly, there's a lot of like things you see in the dark at night when you're out going to the bathroom that you can never explain again. Finn has a story from the Mahoosics that it curdles my blood every time I hear it. From a time that he tried to pack in the middle of the night. Do you think you could do it justice?
A quick recap of that one. So we were working near Sunday River Whitecap this time, not Rumford Whitecap. But we were up in the Notch up there, and I had been working for Mountain Heartbeat Farm during the day and was coming into camp that night, and so I started up this old logging road and went way up through the woods, and I was out there with my dog June, and all of a sudden we heard this crashing and smashing in front of us, and June usually like tears off after anything she hears, like she likes to treat bears and squirrels equally, but she just ran and hid behind me, and with my headlamp on, I looked around and I looked out into the woods, and I saw these two eyes were too high up to be any kind of animal that I know about. You know, they were facing right ahead, like not like a deer or something like that, but they were too high above the ground to be an animal that I've seen without my headlamp before. So you definitely kind of collect. You get to have really interesting, special interactions with animals and with the world that you live in, because you live there the whole time. You know, it's not often that people get to live way out in the wilderness in the heart of the White Mountains. But that's one of the many real pleasures of this job, is that you get to be there the whole time, and so you see lots of things that you never see hiking because you're just not there long enough.
Yeah. Ah. Does that answer it? Should we?
You want more?
Cool.
Go ahead, Ben.
Hi, folks. I just have a quick couple questions for you. What is the best way to get in touch with you guys? Maybe about work or just to ask more questions. And my second
Wow.
question is, what are you most looking forward to for this upcoming summer?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Great question, Sam.
Well, it goes without saying, I don't know if this will hit well with the audience we have here tonight, but Instagram is a great way to get in touch with us. We've certainly learned that the best way to promote as a business is Instagram. It brings in more hits than anything else, though I wish I could tell you that putting posters up in North Conway got us the most attention, but these days the algorithms seem to deliver a lot. But in general, we love to communicate over email. Trail Fixing Collective, one word, one phrase, @gmail.com is our way that we communicate with clients. And we're always there firing off emails. It's a group email, so if you email one of us, you email all of us. And we're happy to come out and consult, look at projects, look at ideas for land managers and conservation groups. As far as what we're most excited about for this year, holy cow. What would I say? What do you all think? I'm kind of
I'm excited for most of us to live in the same house again.
yeah. That is good.
You know, we were a little more spread out on the weekends last summer, and I think that has its virtues too. You know, it's good to get space from the people that you spend all week with. I'm really, all of you know, it is a joy to be in Tamworth all summer long. And we are so glad that it looks like we will be once again.
Yeah, I'm myself. I'm motivated to do some patrolling work. Hopefully this summer. Looks like we've got some work possibly lined up, doing just routine level 1 maintenance. So that's just clearing the corridor of fallen down trees with axes and chainsaws and hand saws as well. So I just love that work, and I'm looking forward to getting out there for that. Yeah, I'll just mention we also have a P.O. box in Tamworth. If anyone still does snail mail, it's P.O. Box 52, but we probably won't get too much work through that, but I figured I'd just put it out there as well.
You've also got a beautiful website that people might like to know about, so they can just learn more about you.
That's pretty easy to find too. It's just trailfixingcollective.com. Just make sure you spell collective with 2 L's.
Go ahead, Paul.
All King.
Yeah, do you have any basic suggestions for those of us volunteer trail adopters? Basically clean water bars and remove blowdowns. Tips, suggestions to have us do a better job?
Great.
I would say primarily focus on the drainages. Simply just rebuild berms. That helps a lot, or even just add more drainages, to be honest with you. If you've been next to Nat Scrimshaw, he'll preach on the value of drainages and removing the water from the trail.
Mhm.
So there's that. But
Yeah. I think just to give you a visual, if you know stone water bars, they're sort of a set of stones toothed in next to each other. And the how they're built originally is a berm of sediment is built up against the stone on the uphill side so that water running down the trail hits that berm and shoots off down the downhill side of the trail. And as the trail ages and maintenance is maybe or maybe not kept up, that berm sort of like gums around teeth can start to decay and sort of fall away, and the teeth are exposed. And it's best to bring a hoe with you and sort of scratch more soil up against those teeth and reestablish that berm. I also want to just say, as an avid winter hiker, I think people often forget that a real trail corridor should be cleared generally about 4 feet by 12 feet, because in the wintertime, when you're up on a monorail of snow, you're always smacking your head on limbs. So bringing maybe a longer saw and being able to sort of go off trail and take limbs that you might not initially consider as being interference in the trail does a lot for hikers throughout the season, you know, when trees are wet or covered in ice and snow. Yeah, think outside the box with what the trail conditions might be like when you're working on your trail.
Thanks.
I got a quick question. You guys are all young and strong, and a bunch of us used to be. What do you have any kind of routine to maintain your bodies with all this kind of tough physical labor?
That's funny.
I mean, I think we all have our different ways. You know, some of us do yoga. Finn and I are avid runners on the weekends.
Me too. What are you talking about?
And Colin as well. But I was going to say Colin does a lot of skiing in the wintertime, so that's kind of his niche. But most of us are runners in one way or another. And Hunter, you're probably the strongest amongst us. You have all your methods of staying in shape.
Just stretching and push-ups.
Physical therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. After pulling my back once in 2018, it's like, oh, I guess I got to stretch more. Crap.
I think that's part of how we've ended up doing what we do now, is that the trail work that all of us started doing when we got started was really, really hard on our bodies. And that's not to say that the work we do now isn't, but every week we find new ways of making it easier on our bodies. And that's like a huge part of what we talk about every week, is how can we keep ourselves from being as sore as we were this week, and what things can we tweak, what can we change. And I think everyone has their own ways of taking care of their body, but a huge part of it is the way that you do your work. You know, we don't at all something that came to me while we were talking earlier is that a lot of those first couple of years of trail work is learning how to use your body to do what you have to do. You know, like you're moving a rock that is many times heavier than your body. You have to experiment a lot before you find an efficient way to move that rock with really basic tools like a lever. We learned how to do that. Not that we don't learn more every year, but now much more of our work centers around doing things very precisely and building something in exactly the way we want it to be, rather than using brute force to move something at any means necessary.
Speaking of which, when I worked in the huts years ago at Lakes, we built the foundation for the dining room. And when we split rocks before we used this motorized thing to drill the holes. And you don't, or what do you use? Or that sounds pretty tough if you don't use a motorized drill.
We do. We have mostly we use battery powered Milwaukee pneumatic hammer drills, I guess they're called, but we also have some drills that are powered by generators as well. So
I'm glad it's not like like the old foundations you see out in the woods where they,
Right. Yeah. Well, some of us have actually worked on crews in wilderness zones, and within those areas, you are legally required to use no machinery.
Yeah.
And there are crews in the Northeast, especially in the Adirondacks, where wilderness zones are far more common, who still use the star bit method, a star bit drill piece that you hit with a sledge, turn 90 degrees, hit again, and do that for, an hour or two to make a hole, and then continue along to set your feathers and wedges to split your rock. It's incredibly labor intensive, and a day of that will make you appreciate for the rest of your life the power of a hammer drill.
Yeah.
Not be underspoken. Yeah.
That's part of I think why our business works and why we get hired is that, like, it might seem like in your yard, it's not too complicated to build a set of steps out of the rocks that are there. But when you think about doing it in a really difficult location and trying to do it in such a way that it will be really lasting, it takes a lot of time to learn how. And I think that's part of our niche, is that there's not a lot of people who know how to do this kind of work with hand tools. There are other professional crews, but a lot of them build most of their trails with machines, and we don't. Both because we can't afford excavators, and because we know how to do it by hand, and because there's lots of places where you just have to. There's not a way that you could do it without skill.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool, you guys. Thanks for spending tonight with us. It's been so interesting.
Yeah, no problem.
A total pleasure. Yeah, this is really cool. It's pretty crazy bringing a bunch of trail builders together for a presentation. We're kind of famously antisocial. It's incredible that you got us in front of a stage like this, but we're trying it out. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate it. And I think Polly mentioned your website, and there are pictures of other things you do on the website. So people make sure to check that out. Really a treat, you guys. Thanks for making a way to stay around here and spending the night with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Have a good one.
Good night.
Take care.
Guten Nacht.
Recording.